I stared at my laptop screen in complete disbelief. My Harvard Medical School application, 4 years of pre-med work, countless sleepless nights of studying all gone. The folder was empty. Every single document I had spent months perfecting had vanished into digital oblivion. My twin sister Carmen stood in my doorway, arms crossed, my laptop cord dangling from her hand like a trophy. Her smirk cut through me like a surgical blade. "Deleted your med school application," she said, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Now you can't compete with me." My hands trembled as I frantically clicked through every possible recovery option on my computer. Nothing. Carmen had done this systematically, completely. She walked closer and I could see something in her eyes I had never noticed before. Pure satisfaction mixed with years of buried resentment. "You think this was just tonight?" Carmen laughed, settling into my desk chair like she owned the place. "Oh, Hilton, you have no idea what I've been doing." The deadline was in 6 hours. 6 hours to recreate an application that had taken me months to perfect. But Carmen wasn't finished talking. She wanted me to know everything. "Remember when your MCAT study materials disappeared 3 months ago? That wasn't an accident. I deleted every single practice test, every study guide, every note you had saved." She spun around in my chair, enjoying my growing horror. "You had to retake the test because of me. And you still don't know, do you?" My stomach dropped. The MCAT retake had cost me $1,500 and 3 months of additional stress. I had blamed myself for poor organization for not backing up my files properly. The coffee spill on your recommendation letters from Dr. Martinez and Professor Johnson. Also me. I waited until you left them on the kitchen table and dumped my entire mug right on top. Carmen's voice grew more animated with each confession. "You scrambled for weeks trying to get new ones written. I watched you stress and panic, begging those professors to rewrite everything from memory." I sank onto my bed, the full scope of her sabotage becoming clear. Every obstacle I had faced in the past year, every setback that seemed like bad luck or my own carelessness, had been deliberate. And that volunteer shift at the hospital where you showed up on the wrong day and looked like a complete idiot in front of the coordinator, I changed the date in your calendar app while you were sleeping. They thought you were unreliable. It took you weeks to rebuild that relationship. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I had been mortified standing in the empty volunteer office, being told by a frustrated coordinator that my shift had been the previous Tuesday. I had apologized profusely, wondering how I could have made such a basic mistake with something so important. Carmen stood up and walked to my bookshelf, running her finger along the medical textbooks I had collected over 4 years. "You want to know why I did it? Because you weren't supposed to be the smart one. I was always the smart one, Hilton. Always. Until high school, when you suddenly started getting better grades than me." She turned around, and for the first time I saw vulnerability mixed with the anger. "Mom and Dad used to brag about me. 'Carmen should be the doctor,' Mom would say. 'She's always been smarter.' Then you started getting straight A's in chemistry and biology, and suddenly it was all about you." The irony was crushing. I remembered those comments from our parents, but I had always thought they were trying to motivate me by pointing out how successful Carmen was. I never realized she had heard them as predictions of her own destiny. "The nursing school rejections came last week," Carmen whispered. "All 5 programs I applied to. Rejected. And you know what Mom said when I told her, 'Maybe you should have tried harder like your brother.'" I tried to speak to find words of comfort or understanding, but Carmen cut me off. "I've been reading your emails for months, Hilton. Every acceptance letter, every scholarship notification, every interview invitation. I know you've been getting into schools I can't even dream of attending. I watch you check your application status every morning like it's Christmas." My laptop felt like it weighed 100 pounds as I opened it again, hoping against hope that somehow the files would reappear. But the application folder remained stubbornly empty. Carmen walked toward my door, then turned back one final time. "You call the admissions office if you want. It's after midnight on a Saturday." No one will answer. By Monday morning, the deadline will have passed and you'll be just like me. Rejected, ordinary, forgotten. She left me sitting there staring at my empty computer screen with less than 6 hours to recreate 4 years of work. In the distance, I could hear her bedroom door slam, followed by music turned up loud enough to drown out any sound of my panic. I tried calling Harvard's admissions office, knowing Carmen was right. The automated message confirmed what I already knew: office hours were Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Emergency contact information was available only for current students, not applicants. My phone showed 12:37 a.m. The application portal would close automatically at 6 a.m. Everything I had worked for, every dream I had nurtured since freshman year of college, was evaporating in real time. I opened my email, desperately searching for any backup files I might have sent to myself or others. Nothing. Carmen had been thorough. She had even deleted the confirmation emails from when I had originally submitted drafts to the application portal. The worst part wasn't even losing the application. It was realizing that my own sister had been systematically destroying my life for months, and I had been completely oblivious. Every time I had comforted her about her nursing school rejections, every time I had tried to encourage her to keep trying, she had been actively sabotaging my future. I sat in my empty room surrounded by medical textbooks and acceptance letters from other schools I had already turned down to focus on Harvard, and wondered if there was any way to recover from this level of betrayal. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. just as I was considering whether to wake up my parents. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, my ex-girlfriend from junior year. We hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since a fight that had ended our 2-year relationship. Hilton. I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about something, and I think you need to know. Her voice sounded strained, worried. Sarah had always been intuitive about trouble, even when we were together. Sarah, I can't really talk right now. I'm dealing with a crisis, and it's about Carmen and your medical school applications. That's the crisis you're dealing with, isn't it? The hair on my arm stood up. How did you... I'm coming over. I have something you need to see. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in my doorway holding a manila folder thick with papers. She looked exactly the same, auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing an oversized sweatshirt from our college. But her expression was more serious than I had ever seen it. Carmen contacted me 4 months ago. Sarah said, settling cross-legged on my floor. She said she was planning a surprise party for your acceptance to medical school and wanted copies of your essays to make a scrapbook. She opened the folder, revealing printed copies of my personal statement, supplemental essays, and activity descriptions. My own words stared back at me from pages I had never printed myself. I thought it was sweet at first, your sister wanting to celebrate your success. So I gave her everything you had sent me when I was helping you proofread. Sarah's voice grew quieter. But then she started asking weird questions. What kind of questions? Technical stuff about application deadlines, whether you had applied to other schools, what your backup plans were if you didn't get accepted anywhere. She wanted to know if you had shared your login information with anyone, if you kept backup files, whether you had told your parents about interview invitations. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages from Carmen spanning several months. The questions had grown increasingly specific and invasive. I started getting suspicious when she asked me if I thought you deserved to get into medical school more than other people who had been rejected. She said something about how unfair it was that some people get lucky while others work just as hard and get nothing. I stared at the printed essays, realizing Sarah had unknowingly saved my entire application. But everything would need to be rewritten and reformatted for the online portal. There's more, Hilton. Carmen didn't just contact me once. She's been calling me every few weeks, fishing for information about your relationship with professors, your research projects, your volunteer work. I started lying to her because something felt wrong. Sarah pulled out another folder, this one containing printed emails between her and Carmen. She asked me about your character, whether I thought you were honest, whether I had ever seen you cheat or cut corners. She wanted to know if you had any weaknesses or secrets that might come out during background checks for medical school. The implication was terrifying. Carmen hadn't just been planning to delete my application. She had been gathering ammunition for a character assassination campaign. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, trying to keep accusation out of my voice. Sarah looked down at her hands. "Because of how we ended things. Because you told me you never wanted to see me again after I supposedly flirted with that guy at Jessica's party. Because Carmen convinced you I was cheating on you." The memory came flooding back. Carmen had shown me pictures of Sarah talking to a guy at a party, had spun an entire narrative about Sarah's disloyalty, had encouraged me to break up with her before I got hurt worse. I had trusted my sister's version of events completely. "Carmen set that up," Sarah continued. "She invited that guy specifically because she knew he would flirt with anyone, then took photos at angles that made innocent conversation look intimate. She showed you the pictures before I had a chance to explain that he was Jessica's cousin from out of town who was asking for directions to a gas station. I felt like I was discovering that my entire life had been a lie. How many other relationships, opportunities, and experiences had Carmen manipulated without my knowledge? Sarah and I worked side by side for the next 3 hours, recreating my application from the printed copies and my fragmented memories. She helped me rewrite my personal statement, making it stronger than the original version. Her fresh perspective and editorial skills transformed my rushed panic into compelling prose. At 5 a.m., my research mentor, Dr. Bradley, called back after finally seeing the emergency voicemail I had left on his office phone. Without hesitation, he offered to drive to campus immediately and email my recommendation letters directly to Harvard's admissions office from his university account. "Don't worry about the time," Dr. Bradley said. "Admissions offices deal with technical emergencies all the time. They'll have staff monitoring submissions right up until the deadline." As Sarah helped me upload the final documents to Harvard's portal, I felt a mixture of gratitude and regret. She had spent her entire night helping me recover from my sister's sabotage, despite the fact that I had broken up with her based on Carmen's lies. "Why are you helping me?" I asked as we double-checked the application one final time. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from her all night. "Because I never stopped believing in you, even after you stopped believing in me." At 5:57 a.m., with 3 minutes to spare, I submitted my completed application to Harvard Medical School. The confirmation email arrived 30 seconds later. That's when Carmen came home. I heard the front door slam and unsteady footsteps on the stairs. Carmen appeared in my doorway, clearly drunk, mascara smeared down her cheeks. She saw Sarah sitting on my floor, surrounded by papers, and went from confused to furious in an instant. "What is she doing here? What are all those papers?" Sarah stood up calmly, gathering the printed essays into neat piles. "I'm helping Hilton fix the problem you created, Carmen." "You can't fix anything," Carmen screamed, lunging toward my laptop. "I made sure he couldn't reapply. I deleted everything." Sarah stepped between Carmen and my computer. "Actually, you didn't delete everything. I had copies of his essays from months ago when I was helping him edit them. You know, back when you were pretending to plan a surprise party." Carmen's face went white. She had been caught in her own lie. "You were never planning a party, were you, Carmen?" Sarah continued. "You were gathering intelligence so you could destroy your brother's future." Carmen collapsed into my desk chair, the fight going out of her as quickly as it had appeared. "You don't understand. Nobody understands. He was going to leave me behind. Everyone was going to forget I existed." Sarah's voice softened. "Carmen, your brother getting into medical school doesn't diminish your worth as a person." But Carmen wasn't listening to reason. She was spiraling into a dark place I had never seen before. "You think you won, but you didn't." Carmen said, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. "I can still destroy him. I can call every medical school he applied to and tell them he cheated on his MCAT. I can provide evidence. I can make sure he never gets accepted anywhere." She pulled out her phone, and I realized that submitting my application had only been the first battle. Carmen was preparing for war. Carmen wasn't bluffing. Monday morning, I received a call from Harvard's admissions office requesting an emergency interview regarding allegations of academic misconduct. The voice on the other end was professional but serious, explaining that they had received a detailed report questioning the integrity of my MCAT scores and application materials. We take all allegations of academic dishonesty very seriously, Mr. Johnson. The interview is scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. Please bring any documentation that supports the legitimacy of your test scores and application content. I hung up feeling nauseated. Carmen had followed through on her threat, and now my acceptance was in jeopardy. What I didn't know was that Carmen had gone to our parents immediately after her confrontation with Sarah and me. She had broken down, completely confessing everything she had done and begging them to help her fix it. I destroyed his application, Dad. I've been sabotaging him for months. And now I've made it worse by reporting him for cheating when he never cheated at all. Carmen sobbed in our father's arms like she was 10 years old again. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to make it right. Our father, David Johnson, worked as an engineer for a tech company, but his college roommate had become the director of medical education oversight for the state licensing board. Without telling Carmen he was going to intervene, Dad called his friend Marcus Webb that same Monday evening. Marcus, I have a situation. My son is being falsely accused of MCAT fraud by his own sister, and I need advice on how to handle this properly. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Marcus explained that false accusations of academic misconduct were serious offenses that could result in criminal charges against the accuser. He advised Dad to document everything and recommended that Hilton hire an attorney specializing in educational law. Meanwhile, I spent Monday and Tuesday gathering evidence of my legitimate test preparation and study habits. Sarah helped me compile timestamps from my computer, showing months of practice tests and study sessions. Dr. Bradley provided detailed testimony about my character and research abilities, emphasizing my integrity and work ethic. What I didn't realize was that Carmen's behavior had become increasingly erratic since the night she destroyed my application. She was checking my social media accounts multiple times per day, following me when I left the house, and creating fake email accounts to send additional anonymous tips to Harvard's admissions office. Carmen had convinced herself that if she could provide enough evidence of my alleged cheating, she could retroactively justify her original sabotage. In her twisted logic, proving that I was dishonest would make her actions seem protective rather than destructive. I started noticing that things in my room were being moved around. Books were in different positions. Papers were shuffled, and my computer showed signs of being accessed when I wasn't home. I mentioned this to Sarah, who suggested I set up a hidden camera. Carmen's behavior is escalating, Hilton. She's not thinking clearly. You need to protect yourself. I bought a small wireless camera and hid it behind my textbooks, positioned to record anyone who entered my room. The decision felt like a betrayal of family trust, but Carmen had already shattered that trust beyond repair. Our family dinners became exercises in tension. Mom and Dad knew about Carmen's confession, but Carmen had begged them not to tell me. They sat at the table with the weight of terrible secrets, trying to act normal while their daughter continued to lie, and their son prepared to defend himself against false accusations. Carmen, meanwhile, had become a master of passive-aggressive comments. She would make subtle references to my questionable study methods and wonder aloud whether I had really earned my scores. Our parents watched these performances in horror, knowing the truth but feeling bound by their promise to Carmen. I just think it's interesting how some people seem to get lucky on standardized tests. Carmen said over dinner Tuesday night, cutting her chicken with more force than necessary. Like, what are the odds that someone would improve their score so dramatically on a retake? I looked directly at her. Are you implying something, Carmen? I'm just saying that consistency matters. When someone's performance varies wildly, it raises questions about authenticity. Our father dropped his fork with a clatter. Carmen, that's enough. I'm not saying anything specific. I'm just discussing test validity in general terms. Our mother excused herself from the table, unable to continue the charade. Dad followed her, leaving Carmen and me alone with the tension that had been building for days. "You're going to get caught," Carmen said quietly. "Whatever shortcuts you took, whatever help you had that you weren't supposed to have, it's going to come out. And when it does, everyone will know I was right about you." I stood up to leave, but Carmen wasn't finished. "Sarah can't save you this time. Your professors can't protect you. When Harvard investigates, they'll find the truth." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed reviewing every study session, every practice test, every moment of preparation for my MCAT retake. I knew I had done nothing wrong, but Carmen's accusations were so detailed and confident that I started second-guessing my own memories. Had I ever discussed questions with other test takers? Had I ever looked up answers in ways that might be considered improper? Had I unknowingly violated any testing protocols? At 2 a.m., I called Sarah. "She's making me doubt myself," I admitted. "I know I didn't cheat, but she sounds so certain that there's evidence against me." That's what manipulative people do, Hilton. They make you question reality. You studied harder for that retake than anyone I've ever known. You have nothing to worry about. But as Wednesday approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that Carmen was setting a trap I couldn't see. She was too calm, too confident for someone who was simply making false accusations. There had to be something more to her plan. Wednesday morning, as I prepared for my interview with Harvard's admissions committee, I checked the hidden camera footage from the previous night. What I saw made my blood run cold. Carmen had entered my room around midnight and carefully planted printed emails in my desk drawer. The emails, which I could see clearly in the camera footage, appeared to be correspondence with a test prep service that offered guaranteed score improvements through methods that violated MCAT policies. She had spent hours creating fake evidence of cheating, complete with realistic email headers and convincing details about prohibited assistance. If Harvard searched my room or computer, they would find carefully planted proof of the very accusations Carmen was making. I realized that Carmen hadn't just accused me of cheating. She had created an elaborate setup designed to destroy my credibility and justify her original sabotage. The interview at Harvard wasn't just about defending my integrity. It was about surviving a carefully constructed frame job orchestrated by my own sister. The hidden camera had saved me from a trap that could have ended my career before it started. But it had also shown me just how far Carmen was willing to go to destroy me. And I knew that confronting her with this evidence would only escalate her increasingly dangerous behavior. The call came at 7 a.m. Thursday morning, just as I was preparing to leave for my Harvard interview. Dean Patricia Parker's voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of urgency that made my heart race. "Mr. Johnson, this is Dean Parker from Harvard Medical School admissions. I need to see you in my office immediately, but not for the reasons you think. We have some rather extraordinary information to share with you." The drive to Harvard's campus felt surreal. I kept replaying the dean's words, trying to understand what extraordinary information could possibly mean. My appointment was supposed to be about defending myself against Carmen's accusations, but something had clearly changed overnight. Dean Parker's office overlooked Harvard Yard with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the space feel both impressive and welcoming. She was younger than I had expected, maybe mid-40s, with short gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But her expression was serious as she gestured for me to sit across from her mahogany desk. "Mr. Johnson, before we begin, I want you to know that you are not in any trouble. In fact, quite the opposite." She opened a thick folder containing what appeared to be screenshots and printed documents. "Are you familiar with our portal tracking system?" I shook my head, confused by the direction this conversation was taking. "When applicants log into our secure admissions portal, our system records detailed information about every action taken during that session. This includes keystroke logging, screen recording, IP address tracking, and timestamp documentation for security purposes." Dean Parker turned her computer monitor toward me, showing what appeared to be a video recording of someone using a computer. 3 days ago, our system flagged unusual activity on your application account. Someone accessed your portal at 2:37 a.m. and spent approximately 45 minutes deleting files, reading confidential status updates, and downloading secure documents. My mouth went dry as I realized what she was showing me. The individual accessing your account was not you, Mr. Johnson. The activity originated from a different IP address in your neighborhood, and the behavioral patterns were inconsistent with your previous portal usage. She clicked to another screen showing a detailed log of digital activity. More concerning, this same unauthorized user has been accessing your account sporadically for the past 4 months, always during late-night hours when you would typically be asleep. I watched in fascination and horror as Dean Parker walked me through months of Carmen's digital stalking. Every email she had read, every document she had accessed, every confidential update she had viewed was recorded in exacting detail. The unauthorized user downloaded your recommendation letters, copied your personal statement, and accessed financial aid information that should only be available to you. Dean Parker's voice grew more serious. This constitutes a serious breach of federal privacy laws, Mr. Johnson. She opened another folder containing printed emails. Yesterday, we received multiple anonymous reports questioning your academic integrity. These reports contained highly specific details about your application materials and testing history that would only be available to someone with unauthorized access to your account. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Carmen hadn't just been sabotaging my application. She had been conducting sophisticated digital surveillance for months. Our IT security team traced all of this activity to a specific device and location. The unauthorized access originated from a computer registered to Carmen Johnson at your home address. Dean Parker looked at me with sympathy. I'm very sorry, Mr. Johnson. We believe your sister has been systematically violating your privacy and attempting to sabotage your medical school application. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what Carmen had done. It was far worse than I had imagined. There's more, Dean Parker continued. This morning, we received another anonymous report claiming you had planted fake evidence in your room to cover up cheating. The level of detail in this report, combined with our portal tracking data, suggests that your sister may be escalating her interference. She handed me a printed email that made my blood run cold. Carmen had not only reported the fake evidence she had planted in my room, she had provided Harvard with detailed instructions on where to find it and what it would prove. Mr. Johnson, I want you to know that Harvard Medical School has dealt with family sabotage cases before. Unfortunately, competitive academic environments sometimes bring out the worst in family dynamics. We have protocols for these situations. Dean Parker opened yet another folder, this one containing what appeared to be legal documents. We are offering you immediate acceptance to Harvard Medical School with a full merit scholarship effective for the upcoming academic year. Your application materials, test scores, and character references are exemplary. The attempts to undermine your candidacy have only reinforced our confidence in your integrity and resilience. I stared at her in disbelief. After days of terror about losing everything, I was being offered exactly what I had dreamed of. However, Dean Parker continued, we are also filing a formal complaint with federal authorities regarding unauthorized computer access and identity theft. Your sister's actions constitute serious crimes that could result in federal charges and permanent exclusion from all medical and nursing education programs in the United States. The weight of Carmen's situation hit me like a physical blow. In trying to destroy my future, she had completely obliterated her own. Is there any way to handle this without pressing charges? I asked. She's my sister. She needs help, not prison. Dean Parker's expression softened. I appreciate your compassion, Mr. Johnson, but this decision is no longer entirely up to you. Federal law requires us to report certain types of computer crimes, especially when they involve educational institutions. However, your cooperation and testimony could influence how prosecutors choose to proceed. She handed me a business card for the university's legal counsel. You'll need to speak with an attorney about your options. But I want you to understand that your sister's actions have consequences that extend far beyond your family. Dean Parker walked me to the door, then turned back with a final thought. Mr. Johnson, I've been in admissions for 15 years, And I've seen a lot of family dysfunction, but I've rarely seen anyone respond to betrayal with the grace and maturity you've shown. That tells me we made the right choice in accepting you. As I drove home with my acceptance letter and scholarship agreement, I felt an overwhelming mixture of relief, joy, and sadness. I had achieved my dream, but the cost to my family was going to be enormous. I called Sarah from the parking lot of a coffee shop near Harvard, unable to process everything alone. They've been watching Carmen's computer activity for months, I told her. They have evidence of everything she did. She's facing federal charges, Sarah. How do you feel about that? It was a simple question with an incredibly complicated answer. I felt vindicated, relieved, and terrified all at the same time. I don't want her to go to prison, but I also can't pretend that what she did was okay. She didn't just hurt me. She violated federal laws and tried to destroy my entire future. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You're going to have to testify, aren't you? I looked at the Harvard acceptance letter in my hand, official and beautiful, and everything I had worked toward for 4 years. But all I could think about was Carmen, and how our family was about to be torn apart by the consequences of her choices. That evening I drove home knowing that everything was about to change. Carmen still didn't know that her digital activities had been discovered, and she was about to receive the shock of her life. As I pulled into our driveway, I could see lights on in the living room and hear music coming from inside. It sounded like Carmen was having some kind of celebration. I had no idea that she was throwing herself a party to celebrate what she believed was my destruction, completely unaware that federal agents were already preparing warrants for her arrest. The music was loud enough to hear from the street. Through our front window, I could see Carmen laughing with several friends from her community college, drinks in hand, looking happier than I had seen her in months. She had clearly invited people over to celebrate what she believed was my academic downfall. I sat in my car for a few minutes, holding my Harvard acceptance letter and trying to decide how to handle what was about to happen. Carmen had no idea that her crimes had been discovered or that federal authorities were involved. In her mind, she had successfully destroyed my future and was finally free from living in my shadow. Before I could decide whether to go inside or wait elsewhere, 2 black SUVs pulled up behind my car. Federal agents in dark suits stepped out along with a Harvard University security officer I recognized from campus. They moved with the calm efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Agent Rebecca Torres, the lead investigator, approached my car window. Mr. Johnson, we spoke on the phone earlier about your sister's unauthorized computer access. We have warrants to search the premises and arrest Ms. Carmen Johnson. We'd appreciate your cooperation, but you're not required to be present during the arrest. I looked back at the house where Carmen's celebration was still in full swing. She doesn't know you're coming, does she? No, sir. We find that suspects are more cooperative when they haven't had time to destroy evidence or prepare false statements. The agents walked to our front door and rang the bell. I followed at a distance, unable to stay away, despite knowing how painful this would be to witness. Carmen answered the door with a huge smile, clearly expecting another party guest. Her face went through a series of expressions as she processed the badges and official identification being shown to her. Confusion, then fear, then a desperate attempt to maintain her composure. Carmen Johnson, you're under arrest for violations of federal computer fraud and identity theft statutes. You have the right to remain silent. Carmen's friends watched in stunned silence as the charges were explained. Computer fraud, identity theft, academic sabotage, false reporting to federal institutions. Each charge carried potential jail time and permanent consequences for any future educational opportunities. There's been a mistake, Carmen said, her voice rising in panic. I never accessed anyone's computer. I don't know anything about computer fraud. Agent Torres held up a tablet showing detailed logs of Carmen's digital activity. Ms. Johnson, we have 4 months of documented, unauthorized access to your brother's Harvard Medical School application account. We have keystroke logs, screen recordings, and IP address tracking that directly connects this activity to your personal computer. Carmen looked around desperately, seeing her friends' shocked faces, and realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing in real time. Hilton, tell them this is crazy. Tell them I would never do something like this. I stepped forward and Carmen saw the Harvard acceptance letter in my hand. Her face went completely white as the reality hit her. You got in, she whispered. Even after everything I did, you still got in. Agent Torres continued reading Carmen's rights, while her friends quietly gathered their belongings and left. The party atmosphere evaporated completely as federal agents began photographing and documenting evidence throughout the house. Our parents arrived just as Carmen was being placed in handcuffs. They had been called by a neighbor who saw the federal vehicles and was concerned about a possible emergency. Mom immediately started crying when she saw Carmen in custody, while Dad stood frozen in the doorway trying to process what was happening. Mom, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Carmen pleaded as she was led toward the federal vehicle. Tell them Hilton is lying about me. Tell them I would never hurt my own brother. But our parents knew the truth. Carmen had confessed everything to them days earlier, and now they watched helplessly as the consequences of her actions played out exactly as they had feared. Agent Torres handed Dad a list of seized items and explained that Carmen would be held for an initial hearing within 72 hours. Your daughter will need an attorney, Mr. Johnson. These are serious federal charges with mandatory minimum sentences. Carmen began sobbing as the reality of her situation became clear. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. I was just trying to protect myself. I wasn't trying to commit crimes. Ms. Johnson, Agent Torres said gently, creating false evidence, accessing computer accounts without authorization, and filing fraudulent reports with federal institutions are serious felonies. Your motivations don't change the legal consequences of your actions. As Carmen was driven away, our neighbors stood on their porches trying to understand what had happened to the quiet family next door. News of the arrest would spread through our community within hours, adding public humiliation to Carmen's legal troubles. I found Mom and Dad sitting in our living room surrounded by the remnants of Carmen's premature celebration. Empty bottles, party decorations, and a handmade banner that read, "Dreams do come true," created a surreal contrast to what had just occurred. She called all her friends this morning, Mom said quietly. She told them she had exciting news to celebrate. She said her hard work had finally paid off, and that sometimes good things happen to good people. Dad picked up one of Carmen's notebooks from the coffee table. It was filled with detailed plans for her celebration, including a timeline of when she expected to receive confirmation that my Harvard application had been rejected. She had it all mapped out, Dad continued. When the rejection would come, how she would comfort you, how she would position herself as the successful sibling who had stayed on track while you fell apart. The notebook contained page after page of Carmen's fantasies about my failure and her triumph. She had planned speeches about resilience and determination, prepared advice about finding alternative career paths, and even researched other medical schools where I might have a chance of acceptance. She really believed that destroying you would somehow fix her own problems, Mom said through her tears. She thought that if she could prove you weren't as smart or capable as everyone believed, it would validate her own struggles. I sat with my parents in the wreckage of Carmen's delusions, holding my Harvard acceptance letter and feeling more sadness than joy. Carmen's arrest was being broadcast on local news with reporters describing the case as an unusual example of sibling rivalry taken to criminal extremes. The phone started ringing as friends and family members saw the news coverage. Each conversation required explaining the inexplicable, how someone who seemed normal and loving could systematically destroy her own brother's future. But the worst part was yet to come. Carmen would discover from her jail cell that not only had I been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, but that her own community college had immediately suspended her pending the outcome of her criminal case. Her part-time job at a medical billing company terminated her employment the moment they heard about her arrest. In trying to destroy my future, Carmen had ensured that she would have no future at all. And I was about to learn that her spiral into criminal behavior was far from over. The federal prosecutor's office was located in a sleek downtown building that reminded me of every legal drama I had ever watched on television. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen sat across from me in a conference room lined with law books, explaining that Carmen's case had grown beyond simple computer fraud. Mr. Johnson, we've uncovered evidence that your sister's criminal activity extends far beyond her interference with your medical school application. We believe she may have been systematically targeting other students for months. He opened a file containing printed screenshots and digital evidence that made my stomach turn. Carmen had been using similar tactics against classmates at her community college, accessing their academic accounts and sabotaging their applications to transfer programs and nursing schools. We've identified at least 6 other victims, all students who posed some form of academic competition to your sister. In each case, she gained unauthorized access to their accounts and either deleted important documents or filed false integrity complaints with their institutions. I stared at the evidence, realizing that Carmen's obsession with academic sabotage had become a pattern of criminal behavior that affected complete strangers. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry. It was about systematic destruction of other people's educational opportunities. 3 students lost scholarship opportunities because of your sister's interference. 2 were expelled from programs based on false allegations she filed. 1 student's entire college career was derailed when your sister deleted their senior thesis 2 days before the submission deadline. Attorney Chen handed me victim impact statements that were heartbreaking to read. Students describing years of hard work, destroyed overnight dreams, abandoned because of mysterious technical failures, and unexplained accusations of academic misconduct. Your testimony could be crucial in demonstrating the pattern of behavior and helping these other victims receive justice. But I want you to understand that your sister is facing potentially decades in federal prison. The weight of that reality was crushing. Carmen hadn't just hurt me. She had systematically destroyed multiple people's lives while pursuing her own twisted sense of academic justice. What happens if I testify? I asked. We can pursue maximum penalties for all charges. Your sister would likely serve 15 to 20 years in federal prison and be permanently banned from accessing any educational institution's computer systems. He paused, studying my reaction. However, if you're willing to testify about her mental health struggles and family dynamics, we might be able to negotiate a plea agreement that includes mandatory psychiatric treatment instead of maximum incarceration. I spent the next 3 days struggling with an impossible decision. Carmen deserved consequences for her actions, but I couldn't bear the thought of her spending decades in prison. At the same time, I felt a responsibility to her other victims who deserved justice for the harm Carmen had caused them. Sarah helped me research victim advocacy programs and restorative justice options. We discovered that several of Carmen's victims were interested in mediation rather than maximum punishment, particularly if Carmen could make meaningful restitution for the damage she had caused. What if there was a way for Carmen to help other people instead of just being locked away? Sarah suggested. What if she could use her experience to prevent other families from going through this? Together, we developed a proposal for the prosecutors that would allow Carmen to serve reduced prison time in exchange for participating in educational programs about the psychological roots of academic sabotage. She would be required to work with other struggling students and families, helping them recognize warning signs of unhealthy competition before it escalated to criminal behavior. Dr. Bradley, my research mentor, connected me with psychologists who specialized in family dynamics and academic pressure. They helped me understand that Carmen's behavior was symptomatic of deeper issues that affected many families in competitive educational environments. Sibling rivalry in high-achieving families often escalates when parents inadvertently create zero-sum dynamics, where one child's success is perceived as the other child's failure. Explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a family therapist who agreed to evaluate Carmen's case. I started attending therapy sessions to process my own trauma from months of psychological manipulation and betrayal. The sessions helped me understand that my desire to help Carmen didn't mean I had to minimize the harm she had caused or accept responsibility for her choices. Meanwhile, I was preparing to start Harvard Medical School with a clear sense of purpose. I decided to specialize in psychiatry, motivated by a desire to understand the psychological mechanisms that drive people to harm those closest to them. Carmen remained in federal custody, initially refusing to cooperate with investigators or acknowledge the full extent of her crimes. She maintained that her actions were justified by years of unfair treatment and family favoritism, showing no remorse for the other students she had harmed. But 3 weeks after her arrest, Carmen received a letter from one of her victims. Maria Santos, a single mother whose nursing school application Carmen had sabotaged, wrote about losing her scholarship and being forced to delay her education by 2 years because of Carmen's interference. "I don't understand why you chose to hurt me," Maria wrote. "I never did anything to you. I was just trying to build a better life for my children, and you took that away from me for no reason." Carmen called me from jail after receiving Maria's letter, crying harder than I had heard since we were children. "Hilton, I didn't think about them as real people. I was so focused on my own pain that I couldn't see I was destroying other people's lives. How do I fix this? How do I make it right?" For the first time since her arrest, Carmen sounded genuinely remorseful rather than just sorry she had been caught. "You start by taking responsibility for what you did," I told her. "All of it. Not just what happened to me, but what you did to every person you hurt. And then you figure out how to spend the rest of your life making sure it never happens again." Carmen agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators and to participate in the plea agreement that would allow her to serve reduced time in exchange for extensive community service and mental health treatment. 6 months later, I testified at Carmen's sentencing hearing. I spoke about the pain of betrayal, the damage to our family, and the impact on her other victims. But I also spoke about the importance of redemption, the possibility of healing, and my hope that Carmen could eventually become someone who helped rather than harmed others. Your Honor, I concluded my sister committed serious crimes that caused real harm to multiple people. She deserves consequences that reflect the severity of her actions. But I also believe she has the capacity to change, to grow, and to use this experience to prevent others from making similar choices. The judge sentenced Carmen to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. She would be required to complete extensive psychological counseling, perform 500 hours of community service with at-risk students, and make financial restitution to all her victims. More importantly, she was prohibited from accessing any educational institution's computer systems without supervision and was required to participate in ongoing programs designed to help families navigate academic competition in healthy ways. As I watched Carmen being led away to begin serving her sentence, I felt a complex mixture of sadness, relief, and hope. Justice had been served, but more importantly, there was finally a path forward that could lead to healing for everyone involved. 3 years later, I stood in the Harvard Medical School auditorium wearing my graduation cap and gown, scanning the audience for familiar faces. Sarah sat in the front row next to my parents, all of them beaming with pride, as Dean Parker prepared to call my name as valedictorian. Carmen watched from the back of the auditorium, having been released from federal prison 6 months earlier. She looked different now, quieter but more centered, wearing the uniform of the nonprofit organization where she worked with at-risk youth. We had exchanged letters throughout her incarceration, slowly rebuilding a relationship based on honesty rather than competition. Hilton David Johnson. Dean Parker announced graduating summa cum laude with a specialization in forensic psychiatry and a research focus on family dynamics in academic environments. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal, the federal investigation, the months of testimony and legal proceedings, and ultimately the slow process of forgiveness and healing. My research during medical school had focused on developing early intervention programs for families experiencing unhealthy academic competition. Working with Dr. Bradley and several family therapists, we had created screening tools to identify warning signs before competitive dynamics escalated to harmful behavior. The program had been implemented at 3 universities with remarkable results. Families were learning to celebrate individual achievements without creating zero-sum dynamics where one person's success diminished another's worth. Carmen had become an unexpected partner in this research. During her probation, she participated in case studies and helped develop educational materials about the psychological factors that led to her criminal behavior. Her firsthand insights were invaluable in creating programs that actually resonated with struggling students and families. Working with families who are dealing with similar issues has been the most meaningful thing I've ever done, Carmen told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings. I can't undo the harm I caused, but I can help other people avoid making the same mistakes. Carmen had completed her community service requirement by mentoring students who were struggling with feelings of academic inadequacy and family pressure. Several of the young people she worked with had written letters to the court describing how her guidance had helped them develop healthier coping strategies. "She saved me from becoming like her," wrote Alex Thompson, a high school senior who had been caught hacking into classmates' college application accounts. "Carmen helped me understand that other people's success doesn't make me a failure, and that there are better ways to deal with feeling left behind." Maria Santos, the nursing student whose application Carmen had sabotaged years earlier, had eventually completed her degree and was now working as a pediatric nurse. She had participated in restorative justice meetings with Carmen, conversations that were painful but ultimately healing for both women. I needed to understand why she chose to hurt me. Maria explained to reporters covering Carmen's rehabilitation. "When I met her and heard about her own struggles, I realized she was just a broken person who made terrible choices. She's working to fix what she broke, and that matters." Our parents had undergone their own transformation through family therapy. They recognized how their well-intentioned comparisons between Carmen and me had contributed to the competitive dynamic that ultimately led to criminal behavior. "We thought we were motivating both of our children to excel," Dad admitted during one family session. "Instead, we created an environment where success was finite and one child's achievement meant the other child's failure." Mom and Dad had become advocates for healthy family communication around academic achievement. They spoke at parent education seminars about recognizing warning signs of unhealthy competition and creating supportive environments where multiple children could succeed without feeling threatened by each other's accomplishments. Sarah and I had slowly rebuilt our relationship during my medical school years. The crisis with Carmen had shown us how quickly trust could be destroyed by manipulation, but it had also demonstrated the strength of our connection when we worked together toward common goals. We were engaged, now planning a wedding for the following spring. Sarah had completed her graduate degree in counseling psychology and was working with the same nonprofit organization where Carmen volunteered. Together, they ran support groups for families dealing with the aftermath of academic sabotage and sibling rivalry. At my graduation reception, Carmen approached me hesitantly, still uncertain about her place in family celebrations. She carried a small wrapped package and a handwritten letter. "I know I don't have the right to be proud of you," she said quietly, "but I am. Everything you've accomplished, everything you've overcome, especially forgiving me when I didn't deserve forgiveness." The package contained a framed photograph of us as children building a blanket fort in our living room. We were maybe 8 years old, working together and laughing at some shared joke. Carmen had written on the back, "Before I forgot that your success was my success too." Her letter was longer, filled with reflections on our childhood and acknowledgments of specific moments where she had chosen competition over connection. But the final paragraph was what made me understand how completely she had changed. "Hilton, I spent so many years trying to diminish your light because I thought it would make mine shine brighter. Now I understand that helping you succeed makes me feel more successful than any achievement of my own ever did. Watching you become a doctor who helps families heal from the kind of damage I caused feels like the only meaningful redemption I could ever hope for." 6 months after graduation, I opened my private practice specializing in family therapy and forensic psychology. Carmen became my first official research partner, helping to develop treatment protocols for families dealing with destructive academic competition. Our work together attracted national attention when we published a study demonstrating that early intervention could prevent competitive family dynamics from escalating to criminal behavior. Universities across the country began implementing our screening tools and educational programs. Carmen earned her GED while in prison and was now pursuing a bachelor's degree in social work through an online program designed for formerly incarcerated students. She maintained a 4.0 GPA while working full-time and volunteering 20 hours per week with at-risk youth. The difference is that now I'm competing with my own potential instead of comparing myself to other people. Carmen explained during a conference presentation we gave together. Success isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being better than you were yesterday. Our family had found a new equilibrium built on individual achievement rather than comparison. Mom and Dad celebrated Carmen's small victories in social work school with the same enthusiasm they showed for my medical career milestones. They had learned to see success as abundant rather than scarce. 5 years after Carmen's arrest, we received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation commending our family's participation in developing educational programs that had prevented similar crimes in other families. The letter noted that our intervention protocols had been shared with universities nationwide and had contributed to a measurable decrease in family-related academic sabotage cases. The most meaningful recognition came from the families we had helped. Parents wrote to thank us for teaching them how to support multiple children's dreams without creating competition. Students shared stories about learning to celebrate siblings' successes instead of resenting them. Carmen and I continued our research partnership, traveling to universities and conferences to share our story and teach intervention strategies. Our work had evolved from personal healing to systemic change, helping educational institutions create environments where family support enhanced rather than undermined student success. We can't change what happened, Carmen said during one of our presentations, but we can make sure it serves a purpose. Every family that learns healthier ways to handle academic pressure means other siblings won't have to experience what we went through. Looking back on that terrible night when Carmen deleted my medical school application, I realized that her betrayal had ultimately led to deeper healing than would have been possible without the crisis. We had been forced to confront toxic family dynamics, develop empathy for different forms of struggle, and create meaning from our pain. Carmen had served her time, made restitution to her victims, and dedicated her life to preventing others from making similar mistakes. Justice had been served, but more importantly, restoration had occurred. The boy who had his dreams destroyed by his sister's jealousy had become a man who helped other families find their way through similar darkness. The girl who had committed federal crimes out of desperation had become a woman who used her experience to guide others toward healthier choices. Our story had taught us that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals, that justice can include redemption, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give to others is the wisdom gained from our own worst mistakes. As I finished writing this story, I realized that sharing these experiences might help other families recognize warning signs before competition becomes destruction. If one family reads this and chooses communication over competition, if one sibling chooses support over sabotage, then everything we endured will have served a larger purpose. The most important lesson I learned is that success is not finite. One person's achievement does not diminish another's potential. Families can celebrate multiple dreams, support different paths, and find joy in each other's happiness without feeling threatened or left behind. Carmen and I had lost years to competition and betrayal, but we had gained something more valuable: the knowledge that healing is possible, that people can change, and that love can survive even the worst choices we make in our darkest moments. Now, as I help other families navigate similar struggles, I carry the hope that they can find resolution without experiencing the pain we endured. Sometimes the greatest victory is not winning the competition, but realizing that life is not a competition at all. Have you ever experienced unhealthy competition within your own family or educational environment? How did you handle it, and what strategies helped you maintain supportive relationships while pursuing individual goals. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for taking the time to read our story. I hope it provides insight, encouragement, and perhaps a new perspective on handling competitive dynamics in your own life. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video, subscribing for more content about family dynamics and personal growth, and sharing it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the possibility of healing after betrayal. Remember, no matter how dark things seem in the moment, there is always a path forward toward healing, understanding, and genuine success that lifts everyone up rather than tearing others down.